Hey, geometry. Welcome to lesson number 19. This is Mr. Jet. I want you guys to go ahead and answer these three questions. So pause your video, answer these three questions, and then I'll talk about it once you're done. All right, so it's asking if these three are polygons. We should know by this point a polygon is a shape, three or more sides. The sides are straight edges, so they're segments and they're closed. So yes, a rhombus is a polygon, a circle is not a polygon, and then a three-dimensional shape is not a polygon either. We will talk about that today, what a three-dimensional shape is when it's made up of polygons. All the sides here are made up, faces here are made up of polygons, but the shape itself is not a polygon. All right, so today we're going to start looking at three-dimensional shapes, three-dimensional figures, solids. So we are going to first just talk about how to name these different solids. So a solid is simply just a three-dimensional shape. Okay, so it has length, width, height, instead of just length and width, or instead of just base and height, or instead of just two sides, we now have these three-dimensional shapes that we call solids. Okay, just like with two-dimensional shapes, when we have polygons, they're made up of those segments, they're closed. We have these also called a polyhedron, which is what we're talking about when we're dealing with three-dimensional shapes. So a solid that is formed by polygons, so rectangles, rhombus, square, triangles, trapezoids, these different polygons, if they're made up of these polygons, we call that a polyhedron. We talked about on the warm-up, a circle is not a polygon. Okay, so we'll talk about that here. So the type of solids that we have, okay, notice here, we have two bases, and then we have all the other sides are rectangles. We call that a prism. Okay, this specific picture here would be a rectangular prism, but we can have any type of prism. We'll talk about how we name them here in a second. But if we look at this, a prism always has two bases. So I'm going to call top and bottom here my bases. And then all the sides going around here are rectangles. All right, down here we have a base. Okay, in this case our base is a rectangle. And then notice all the other faces are actually triangles here. It's a little bit different. We call that a pyramid. Okay, so a prism has two bases, all the other sides are rectangles. Pyramid, one base, all the other sides are triangles. Okay, notice here both of these are made up of all polygons. Okay, since they're made up of all polygons, those are the types of shapes that we call polyhedron. Okay, so these here, polyhedron is just plural for polyhedron. And so any prism, any pyramid, we're calling a polyhedron. Okay, over here. Notice now on these we have circular bases. Okay, so this one here, I have two circular bases. So circle down here, circle up here. That is what we call a cylinder. Second one, circular base, but there's just one of them. So notice a cylinder is very similar to a prism, but the base is a circle. This one here, a cone. Maybe. Has a circular base, comes to a point at the top. So a cone is similar to our pyramid. Besides, again, it has a circular base instead of a triangle or rectangle or whatever else we're looking at. And then a ball, as you would know it, we know is a sphere. Okay, so those are the different types of solids that we have, and then we should know here, these, since these are made up of circles, these are not going to be polyhedron. Okay, so these are not polyhedra. Okay, because they're made up of circular bases. So we have polyhedra, which are prisms and pyramids, and then cylinders, cones, and spheres are not. All right, today we're really focusing on naming these different shapes. So cylinder, cone, and sphere are easy. That's the only name that they come with. The ones that get a little bit harder are our prisms and our pyramids. So in order to name a prism and a pyramid, we always use the shape of the base. Okay, so in order to name a polyhedron, which is our prisms and our pyramids, we always use whatever the shape the base is. So remember, on a prism, we have two bases. On a pyramid, we have one base. So if I look at this first shape, there's kind of two steps that we have to take here. We have to decide first, is it a prism? Is it a pyramid? Is it a cone? Is it a cylinder? Is it a sphere? Once we do that, then we need to determine, is there a base and what is it? So when I look at this here, this shape has two bases. Okay, I'm going to call the bottom one and the top rectangle my bases. So since it has two bases, I know that this is a prism. Now we name it based on the shape of its base. Well, since the base here is a rectangle, this is a rectangular prism. Okay, second one. Again, notice I can't call top and bottom here my bases. Okay, it's not always bottom and top, because if I call bottom and top, there's really not a top here. And remember, this has two identical bases, and so my bases here are actually the front and the back. So again, this is a prism because it has two bases. All the other sides, all three of these other faces are rectangles, but my bases are triangles. So this is a triangular prism. Same thing here. I have two identical bases, front and back. They are triangles. So since I have two bases and they're triangles, this again is a triangular prism. Over here, my bases again are front and back. So this is a prism. Now we just decide, what is that shape? Well, it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sides. So this is a pentagonal, because it's a pentagon prism. All right, if I look here, okay, now we're looking at this where now I only have one base. Okay, my base is this rectangle at the bottom where all the other sides are triangles. So we talked about when all the other sides are triangles, that is a pyramid. Okay, so this is a pyramid. It's going to be a rectangular pyramid because the base is a rectangle. Here, these get a little tricky because all of the faces are triangles. So really, we just choose whichever triangle we want as our base. So I'm going to choose this one here. All the other ones are triangles. So again, it's a pyramid. So it's going to be a triangular pyramid. Over here, here's my base. My base has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sides. So that's a hexagon. So a hexagonal pyramid. Finally, I get this shape here. We should notice this is a prism because we have base, base. So I have two bases. That makes it a prism. All the other faces are rectangles. The only difference here, so yes, this is a rectangular prism. Only difference here, you probably know this one already. All of these edges are the exact same, 4, 4, 4. So they're all going to be 4. And so yes, it is a rectangular prism, but we also call this a cube. All right, so if all the sides are the same, they're all squares, that makes it a cube. All right, I want you guys to go ahead and try naming these 9 shapes. So pause your video, name these 9 shapes, and then unpause it, and I'll have the answers there. All right, so go ahead and check your answers. So we have rectangular prism, hexagonal pyramid, cone, rectangular pyramid, triangular pyramid. This is the one that gets a lot of people. This is a triangular prism. Okay, so even though it comes to kind of this edge up here, it doesn't come to one point like a pyramid does. So there's two triangular bases, so it's a triangular prism. Cylinder, pentagonal prism, and sphere. All right, last thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about parts of a polyhedron. All right, so we don't really use the word side when we're talking about a polyhedron. All right, because if I think about side, it could be the polygon, it could be the edge. There's a lot of different things that we could kind of think of as a side. And so we don't use the word side when we're talking about a polyhedron. So what we use are these three other terms. And so if we're talking about the polygons, okay, so like these flat surfaces here, we call that the faces. The segments, so these line segments here, where those polygons meet each other. So like right here, where this rectangle meets this rectangle, creates this white segment here. We call those the edges. And then these points, where those edges meet each other, we call those the vertex or the vertices. Okay, and so if I look at this, first of all, rectangular prism, we can count how many faces, edges, and vertices it has. So if I look at this rectangular prism, you should have 4 rectangles going around here, 1 on each end. So we should have 6 faces. If I think about edges, I have 4 along the top, 4 along the bottom, and then 4 going along the side here. So I have 12 edges. And then vertices, I have 4 points. So 4 vertices along the top, 4 vertices along the bottom, and so I have 8 vertices. All right, go ahead and do lesson number 19, practice.